Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. We've got a big show for you today, but first let's start with our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. The Ice Hogs' next home game is Saturday, January 24th versus the Utica Comets. Puck drops at 7 p.m. Two of the West's best collide when the Ice Hogs host the Comets for the 6th annual Pink in the Rink night presented by Swedish American Hospital. The Ice Hogs will skate on pink ice, wearing special pink jerseys, which will be auctioned off throughout the night with proceeds benefiting the Mary Kay and Swedish American Foundations. Additionally, the first 2,500 fans will receive a set of pink foam LED glow sticks. You can get information, tickets, and more at icehogs.com. So, what are you guys thinking? I know, I keep saying we're not going to do more Bears because A, they made us all cry this year, and B, because I said we wouldn't. But there's so much intrigue in the offseason because of so much upheaval, turmoil, and change that I really have to lead with them. Sorry, guys. You can fast forward if you don't like it. Anyway, what are you guys thinking about John Fox? What are you thinking about Ryan Pace? What about the decision to hire Ernie Accorsi as the special assistant? What are you guys all thinking? I know what I'm thinking. I really like the Ryan Pace signing. I thought Ernie Accorsi did a great job. They went and identified the right general manager choice. As far as John Fox, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I think it's a very safe choice, which in the grand scheme of things, compared to what the Bears have done in the past, maybe it's the right choice. Unless you consider the fact that the second stint that George Halas had as the Bears head coach, if you don't consider that coaching experience in his second stint, the Bears have never hired a head coach with head coaching experience at the NFL level before. This is going to be their first time. First time. That's crazy to think about that they've never had a head coach that was a head coach in the NFL before. They've always hired somebody up. It's been their MO since the beginning of the organization. So what happens here then? They bring in a guy who has led the Carolina Panthers to the Super Bowl, has led the Denver Broncos to the Super Bowl, and has, I believe, 14 years of head coaching experience, 14 years of head coaching experience. So you know what you're bringing. You know that he's known for being able to take a team and turn them around and build them back up. Maybe the Bears are looking at this as John Fox is like 60 years old, that by the time he turns his team around and brings them there, it'll be time to promote somebody into a young, exciting coach to take them to the next level. Maybe John Fox is that stepping stone before they go and get a Joe Madden, to use a Cubs analogy. Maybe that's the kind of thing they're going for. But he doesn't knock my socks off as the hire. He's got a defensive background. He went to the Super Bowl with the Giants as a defensive coordinator. And I'm gonna read you some stats here to kind of put this into perspective of why they went somebody with head coaching experience, because they're matching him with a young general manager, and to make sure that you're not too inexperienced everywhere. And then you bring in a defensive mind because your defense is atrocious. So in 18 years as either a coordinator or a head coach, he's been in the bottom half of the league as far as defensive points allowed. So that would be teams that, the bottom half would be teams that gave up tons and tons and tons of points. He only was in the bottom half of the league 4 times in 18 years. That's pretty good. He was only in the bottom half 3 times in rushing yards per attempt. And in those 18 years, and only 6 times in 18 years in the bottom half of the passing yards per attempt. So what that tells you is A, his scheme stops the run, and B, they're not bad at stopping the pass either. His overall coaching record as a head coach is 119-89, which, let's step back a little bit, is a little bit deceptive. If you take away the 3 years that he coached with Peyton Manning, his overall record is actually 81-79. And that includes a 2-14 year in Carolina. But then again, to flip this around a bit, is let's take a look at his non-Peyton Manning quarterbacks. I'm going to list every quarterback that he has been the head coach of and how many games he's head coached them for, to put into perspective that maybe that 81's the 119-89 record's a little inflated because of 3 years of double-digit wins with Peyton Manning, but the 81-79 record may not be something to poo-poo, because look who we have here. He coached 15 games where Rodney Peete was the starting quarterback, 1 game where Randy Fasani was the quarterback, 1 game with Chris Weinke at quarterback, 90 games with Jake Delhomme as the quarterback, 6 games with Vinny Testaverde as the quarterback. And mind you, this isn't young, still pretty good Vinny Testaverde. This is the 2007, I just need one last paycheck Vinny Testaverde. That's not the same Vinny Testaverde. That's like Kansas City Chiefs in his last year, Joe Montana. So 6 games with Vinny Testaverde, 4 with David Carr, 13 with Matt Moore, 10 with Jimmy Clausen, 1 with Brian St. Pierre. I don't even remember Brian St. Pierre. 11 with Tim Tebow, and 5 with Kyle Orton. That's not a lot to work with. That is not a lot to work with at all. I know that Jake Delhomme had his moments in the league, but still, you're looking at half the games were with somebody worse than Jake Delhomme. That's saying Jake Delhomme is the great one there. So I really think that I'm going to pause for a second. I really want to weigh my words here. I think this could be a good hire, somebody that really turns the team around, changes the attitude in the locker room. But I really worry that this is going to be another Lovie Smith type situation / era, where Lovie Smith was great with players. He kept everything in the locker room. He kept everything, all the egos in check. He kept everything quiet. He related well with players, and he had everybody buy into the program, and without having to yell and scream. I think John Fox is going to be somebody similar to that. He's going to come in. He's won in this league. He's got 2 Super Bowl appearances. He's coached players like Julius Peppers and Peyton Manning. Nobody has a bad thing to say about John Fox. You have John Fox that comes in, that he can be buddy-buddy with you, but he still instills that level of discipline in the team. That's what a Lovie Smith brought. But the problem with Lovie Smith was, sure, he had a great special teams coordinator, had one of the best special teams units ever that I can remember. You had a pretty good defense, even though I think a lot of it was smoke and mirrors. I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of them were, when push came to shove, they couldn't hold as well as you thought they could. But they just couldn't put an offense on the field. And they went through their series of terrible quarterbacks because the general manager couldn't provide a legitimate quarterback. So you had your Craig Krenzels and stuff like that. your Brian Greaseys. You had your myriad of offensive coordinators that just couldn't do anything, and you couldn't get that train on the tracks. So that was his ultimate downfall, is he couldn't bring in an offensive coordinator to do anything, and he couldn't put the offense back on track himself, being the head coach. And that's what ultimately led to Lovey having to go, because he couldn't push that team to the next level. And so I think that's the big caution with John Fox, is who is he going to bring in as offensive coordinator? That's going to be the big key of whether he's going to have success. I think to a much, much lesser degree, you're going to have to say, who is your defensive coordinator? Because as the head coach, we've learned from Mark Trestman that you can't go and be the coordinator for the offensive coordinator and the head coach. You need to be the head coach and delegate some of that. And it was too much for Mark Trestman. So this is all going to hinge on the hiring of coordinators for John Fox. I don't worry about the defense. Like I said, I don't worry about the defense as much, but a good defensive coordinator is going to be pretty important. Let's take a look here real quick at the list of coordinators that he's had in his years as head coach. Jack Del Rio was his defensive coordinator in 2002 for the Carolina Panthers, and then again in 2012 through 2014 for the Denver Broncos. Then in 2003 through 2008, he had Mike Dragovic in Carolina, and Mike left to be the defensive line coach for the Green Bay Packers, and he's been there since 2009. So he's been there a long time as a defensive line coach, when he was formerly a defensive coordinator of a really, really good defensive unit. And then 2009, 2010, it was Ron Meeks. In 2011, it was Dennis Allen, his first year in Denver. Offensive coordinators, he had in between 2002 and 2006 was Dan Henning, with Mike McCoy as his offensive assistant and various coordinators. The Mike McCoy thing was really good there. And then 2007 to 2010 was Jeff Davidson, who didn't fare so well. 2011, 2012 brought Mike McCoy with him, who was a pretty phenomenal offensive coordinator. And then Adam Gase, who has been a hot name as far as coaching, 2013, 2014 seasons. Those have been his offensive coordinators. So who is he looking at now? From what I'm reading is the list for offensive coordinators. Let's talk about defensive coordinators. That one's a little less pressing. The names I'm hearing are Dennis Allen, Jim Schwartz. Dennis Allen fired from Oakland Raiders. He was the defensive coordinator in 2011 for the Denver Broncos under John Fox. Jim Schwartz was the former head coach of the Detroit Lions, and he was the defensive coordinator for the Bills, who had a pretty good defense this year. And then Vic Fangio, who was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers for the last few years. Looking at that list, on paper, it sounds pretty impressive. Vic Fangio, he does more of a 3-4 style, but he's had a really top unit this last few years. Always a top 10 defense these last few years with San Francisco. And one of the knocks, though, is if you look at places he's been defensive coordinator where he hasn't had that high-level talent that they have in San Francisco, he hasn't really performed that well. If you look at his years as the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis from 99 through 2001, if you look at the points, the rank as far as giving up points, where number one would be the team that gave up the fewest points, and 30th would be the team that gave up the fewest or the most points, or 32nd. They were 30th that was his last year in Indianapolis or Carolina. So 98 in Carolina, they were 30th in points. 15th in Indianapolis in 99, 21st in Indianapolis in 2000, 29th in Indianapolis 2001, 16th in Houston, 31st in Houston in 2003, 23rd in Houston in 2004, 31 in Houston in 2005. It's not until he gets to San Francisco with a really good squad, with a good general manager and a good head coach, that he really starts ramping that up. 4th in 2011, 3rd in 2012, 5th in 2013, and 5th in 2014. You want to look at rushing average per attempt, so average rushing yards per attempt. In Indianapolis, 26th, 23rd, 29th. In Houston, 14th, 22nd, 23rd, 30th. And then once he gets to San Francisco, 1, 3, 9, and 11. What about passing defense? That last year in Carolina, 29th. In Indianapolis, 13, 18, 26. In Houston, 11th, 32nd, 24th, 31. Then he gets good again with San Francisco. That's a little bit of a scary thought, to think that if you don't have top talent, you have terrible defenses. You should be able to, if you're a quality defensive coordinator, get a little more out of your players than that. And if there's one anomaly year, you can probably go back and explain that. Oh, we lost our 2 best pass rushers, or we had some decimation in the secondary as far as injuries, or we lost some people to free agency, or the offense was so bad that they couldn't get any first downs or score any points, so we were on the field a long time and just got gassed. So whatever it be, you can usually explain away a one-year anomaly. But when you have like 7 years in a row where you're terrible, that's on you. It's on you and your scheme. So I don't know if I'm that impressed with Vic Fangio. We could look at Jim Schwartz, who we all know his faults as far as a head coach, with boner plays and mental gaffes and whatnot. But he was a defensive coordinator in Tennessee from 2001 to 2008, and then he was the Lions head coach. And then he was in Buffalo this year. Let's take a look here at his defenses. In Tennessee, yeah, I guess he's had some rough years too in Tennessee. But he had some good years too. 2007, 2008, the 5th best defense and the 7th best defense. Then got to Detroit. They went from 32nd to 21st to 23rd to 13th to 16th. And then in Buffalo, they were the 4th best defense. So he's had some success. Then but at least he's got some head coaching experience under his belt. That's something to at least take away. And then Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was the defensive coordinator for 1 year and then got promoted to head coach. And Denver's defense, they were 29th in. They were 20th in total defensive points allowed. And then his years in Oakland, 18th, 22nd, and 21st. And it's hard to judge you for Oakland because that's such a dysfunctional unit. But none of these guys really knock my socks off. Honestly, I would much rather have Mike Trgovic, because he had a phenomenal run in Carolina as the defensive coordinator. And since then, he's gone to Green Bay, and he's really been on some great teams in Green Bay as far as being the defensive line coach and playing under a good defensive coordinator. I would love for them to be able to lure him away. And that's a possibility that you can have, because A, it's going to weaken your division rival, the team you're chasing, and B, it's going to strengthen you. That's like a win-win if you can do that. And I don't know why you wouldn't. You have years and years of experience working with the guy. And from what I'm reading, is he left Carolina because of some issues with certain superstar players and who was all leaving the team, and then them not re-signing as far as defensive players. That was going to hurt their defensive unit. So he seems like he would be a great choice. So I don't know what you're going to get. But of that list, I'm not sure I'm sold on Vic Fangio. Maybe Jim Schwartz he does some boneheaded plays. Maybe I go Dennis Allen of that list of the potential names I'm hearing. But none of them really knock my socks off. And if you want to talk about the style of defense that John Fox plays, so Lovey had a straight 4-3. They played a lot of cover 2 to sort of, the whole system was you get a lot of pressure with your front 4. Your defensive tackles are really quick, and they penetrate through one gap. They have gap responsibility. You get to your gap, you maintain your gap, and you get to the quarterback through your gap, and you have 4 guys maintaining a lot of pressure on that quarterback because you're getting pressure from your defensive tackles, not just your defensive ends. And then you're forcing the offense to do a lot of short passes to get those yardage and making them methodically beat you down the field. And if you watch most offenses, they want to take shots. And that's when the Bears were creating turnovers, is when you would take shots like that. Quarterbacks that had a lot of patience and offenses that were very methodical didn't have too much of a problem with the Bears. I mean, they always made it tough, but they were able to do it. But that was the Lovey style defense. Then you bring in Mel Tucker style, which was a little bit of Lovey style, and then you sometimes did like a 3-4 type hybrid, but they didn't really have the players for that. You don't really have that 3-4 outside linebacker. Is that Shea McClellan? You don't really have the defensive tackles for it. Maybe Ego Ferguson, maybe Jeremiah Ratliff. But in general, you don't have the personnel for a 3-4, and your hybrid was terrible. So in comes John Fox. John Fox runs a modified 4-3. So you have your 4 regular down linemen that we've always had in Chicago. And I know fans scream and yell for a 3-4, and I don't know why. It just seems like they want something different. It's not like a 3-4 is necessarily better. I prefer a 4-3, but that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that later. But what John Fox typically runs is like a modified 4-3, but he has a 2-gap system. So what that means is when you're on the defensive line, you're responsible for the gap that's on your left and on your right. So you have 2 gap responsibilities. And your defensive tackles, rather than being light, quick guys like a Tommy Harris, you're looking for big run stuffers. And those big run stuffers are the ones that he's, your 300-pound lineman. And then he usually has undersized defensive ends because he's positioning them to not be over a big tackle. So DeMarcus Ware, has really good success under him. He has like undersized guys that can play. And that's going to benefit Jared Allen, I think, because Jared Allen is a little bit of an undersized defensive end. When he was able to come free or use his speed, he can get to guys, but when he has to go through the big left tackle, he has a difficult time. So I think this is going to benefit Jared Allen. But what this tells me as well is, what does that mean for the future of Stephen Paya? Because he doesn't really fit this mold, but he was really great in a system where he's quicker and to get pressure on the quarterback. His forte is not run stuffing and run blocking. Based on the style of defense he runs, the best players available on the Bears' current roster for this would be Ego Ferguson and Jeremiah Ratliff. But that's the type of system that he runs. Switching back to the offense, the candidates I'm hearing, the names and reading a lot about, are Mike Mularkey, who is the tight ends coach of Tennessee Titans, and I've read that the Bears were denied permission to speak to him. They've talked with Adam Gase, who was John Fox's offensive coordinator the last couple years in Denver, and Kyle Shanahan, who had stepped down as the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. I love the thought of having Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator. He did a great job in Houston. He made a winning formula in Washington as far as offense with RG3. RG3 without Kyle Shanahan is a terrible quarterback that's probably going to get run out of this league. But under Kyle Shanahan, he's being talked about in the same breath as Andrew Luck. And he even put up together a respectable offense in Cleveland with Brian Hoyer as his quarterback. He made Brian Hoyer look pretty decent, and they had a top 5 rushing game in Cleveland. When you put together a decent, respectable offense in Cleveland, that means you know you're doing something well. So imagine giving him actual talent. You may not like Jay Cutler, but he is much better than Brian Hoyer. He's got a great ability to throw the ball. If you could put him with a Kyle Shanahan, Jay Cutler already loves the Kyle Shanahan's dad, Mike Shanahan. So you get that respect there, hopefully. And then you give him a great running back like Matt Forte, a healthy offensive line, 2 great receivers in Marshall and Jeffrey, and a awesome tight end. And that just blows my mind of thinking about what you could have. It's what we got the first year with Mark Trestman is not this past year, but the first year with Mark Trestman. Can you imagine that if you could pair it with a much, much better defense? You're looking at playoff turnaround in 1 year. Playoff turnaround in 1 year from this abysmal season we had. But unfortunately, what I'm hearing is that Kyle Shanahan's about to be hired away by the Atlanta Falcons. And I guess the thought of being able to go to that organization and work with Matt Ryan and some of the weapons he has around him was much more to his liking than coming and working with Jay Cutler. Maybe he talked to his dad and said, listen, you do not want to work with Jay Cutler. But I don't see it as a bad thing, because if you come here and you can't work with Jay Cutler is going to be gone next year. They're not going to get rid of another coaching staff for Jay Cutler. That's not going to happen. If Jay Cutler does not perform this year, he will not be a Bear the year after. So Kyle Shanahan would, if he came here, would know, I'm here, the quarterback will go. But if I'm able to succeed and make Jay Cutler play well in my system and do what I want him to do, imagine how many teams are going to be lining up to be the head, or hire him as the head coach. You can win with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback that buys into systems and play well. So it's not that impressive if you can do it with Matt Ryan. But if you can do it with Jay Cutler, that's really saying something. If you can go out there on your resume and just say, look what I did with RG3, look what I did with Brian Hoyer, look what I did with Jay Cutler, that's a winning recipe for hiring somebody. And I'm going to pause right here. I just want to give a plug to our own show. If you are not already doing it, make sure you're checking us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Swerski Sports, on our website, swerskisports.com, and on our Twitter @Swerski Sports. We try to tweet live throughout the games, definitely during the Bears game, and try to do it as much as I can during Hawks and Bulls and when the baseball starts again. But definitely make sure you're checking this out. If you like this show, the best things you can do, besides listening, are tell a friend. Don't just say, oh yeah, I listened to this show. Go, hey, check this out, and email them the link. Also, make sure that you are giving us reviews and 5-star rankings, whether you listen to on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Oh yeah, we're on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Swerski Sports. It's basically just an audio podcast, but we've had a lot of people find the show through YouTube. So if that's the way you find us, awesome. If you don't have access to an iTunes account. You can always listen to it right through YouTube. And that's so those are the ways you can listen. But definitely leave reviews, 5-star ratings, share the show with friends. Really trying to make this grow. And if you guys you want to contact us, it's Bill Swerski, stc@gmail.com, or all of our contact information is on swerskisports.com. And if you have any suggestions for guests that you want to be on the show, or topics you want us to cover, or you think my opinion on the defensive coordinator potential hires is terrible and you want to tell me, or you agree and you love Kyle Shanahan as well, or you have some ideas you want to pitch for off-season moves, definitely shoot those over. We'll definitely talk about those. But yeah, so make sure you check us out and share this with friends. So going back to the offensive coordinators, Kyle Shanahan's looking like he's going to go to, if you believe the Adam Schefter reports and some of the other insider reports, is he's going to be hired by Atlanta and be paired with Dan Quinn. If you told me during the offseason the Bears would get Dan Quinn as the head coach and Kyle Shanahan as your offensive coordinator, this would have been me. I would have been shrieking like a little girl, running around. I would have been so excited because you'd had two up-and-comers that could potentially both be head coaches. Dan Quinn doing a fantastic job in Seattle with that defense, and you have Kyle Shanahan, who's a really good offensive mind. You pair those two together, and you're going to do some great things. Does that mean I think that the hires we're about to make are bad? No. Because you do always run the risk when you have inexperienced coaches. You're going to have a first-time head coach, or a relatively new offensive coordinator. Who knows who you'll have as defensive coordinator? There's always potentiality that you're not going to be able to make that next step. There's been plenty of guys who are great defensive coordinators that haven't been able to step up and do that next level. So that could be it. John Fox has won. John Fox has won everywhere he's gone. So you at least are getting a known commodity. And John Fox, one of his specialties is he brings experience with him. He's not afraid to hire former head coaches to be his assistants. He brings with him some good names. So while I'm not upset about the John Fox hire, part of me wanted something new and exciting, and hopefully that could be our Mike Tomlin that can take us to the next level, or I'm having an old man moment, is Mike McCarthy from Green Bay, where you pluck him out and he's just a winning coach. But I guess to be fair, is you need a winning organization. Those guys went to winning organizations. Does Mike Tomlin coach like that if he's the head coach of the Washington Redskins or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Probably not. Same thing with Mike McCarthy. But would somebody else have been able to step into those roles in a winning organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Green Bay Packers and won? Possibly. So hopefully Ryan Pace can help set this up and turn this into an organization that perpetually wins. And that's the hope. Fingers crossed. Will it happen? I don't have a crystal ball. You don't have a crystal ball. Nobody's got a crystal ball. The best we can do is keep our fingers crossed and be optimistic. One quick last note about the Bears before we move on is Kevin Turks, the longtime director of player personnel for the Bears, fired last week. As of a couple days ago, is Josh Lucas, who was he was the head director of scouting for the southern region for the New Orleans Saints. So Ryan Pace is very familiar with him. He was under Ryan Pace in New Orleans, and looking at him since he's been promoted to that role of director of southern scouting, he's brought over Kenny Vaccaro out of Texas, Teron Armstead out of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Those were players that he scouted, that he was in charge of. And those were two pretty impressive names that you got out of there that weren't the highest rated. They weren't the highest rated guys, but they've done very well. So that's all I got to say about the Bears until next week. We're gonna start next week with, if you are from the show with the show from the beginning, is you know that we before the draft we break down all of the positions and the top players at each position, and not just the top 1, 2, 3. Trying to do at least going 3-4 rounds deep level of guys. So anybody that's going to be in the first at least 3 rounds, hopefully 4 or 5 rounds, we're going to break down, and I watch a ton of game film. I'm not some podunk that just like, oh, I heard this guy's name, he's going to be awesome because I heard of him. Or he went to Notre Dame, he's going to be awesome because I love Notre Dame. I really sit down and I watch game film after game film, much to the angerment of my wife. I sit down and I'll watch full games, every single snap the player is involved in for a whole season. And this first week, next week, is when I'm going to start, and I'm going to do quarterbacks. So you'll next week tune in and we'll break down all the quarterbacks. I think I'm doing 10 quarterbacks for this first time, and which is going to be way more than 3 rounds. Some of these guys might not even be drafted. So I think this is going to be a good list. So tune into that, and that'll be next week. All right, now moving over to Blackhawks, beloved Blackhawks. It's been a rough ride as of late. If you look at them over the past several weeks, it's not been the Blackhawks that we've seen go on these long streaks. It's not the Blackhawks we're used to seeing, and it's not the Blackhawks that we expect to see. It's Blackhawks that are not playing good defense and not putting pucks in the net. And if you look at it from the outside perspective and just by numbers, they should be crushing it. They have the league's pretty much by far the league's best goal differential. So that means if you subtract off the goals that they've allowed from the goals they've scored, that number, so that means they're way outscoring their opponents on average. But they haven't won more than 2 games in a row since December 21st, and that's not what you expect, especially since they haven't been playing the most high-powered of teams. And then you've got Dan Carcillo being indefinitely suspended. He was offered an in-person hearing, which is usually not good as far as how long you're going to be suspended for. He denied to go in person, decided to do it on the phone. So I'm going to guess he's probably going to get 6 games for that hit on Peralt that he had the other day. And here's his quote from after the hit, after the game Saturday. I didn't think it was very malicious or anything. It was just a kind of hockey play. It was at the end of a shift, and I must have caught him between some padding. I've been hit there before too. It hurts. So did he mean to go out there and cross-check him in the back? Absolutely. Did he mean to hurt him? I don't think so. I don't think it was that vicious of a hit at all. Just got him in the right spot. Carcillo going to be out for probably a while, and up comes Joakim Nordstrom to take a spot in the line. You've got, like I said, you've got offensive slumping, and it's not for lack of shots. They're putting a ton of shots up. 20 shots in a period. They're throwing up a lot of shots on net. They've just got a lot of goalies that have been stepping up. They're not getting guys in position to get rebounds. They're not getting those greasy goals. They're doing a lot of slap shots, a lot of one man taking it down. It would be the equivalent of in the NBA driving in the lane, and that just doesn't always work in the NHL. You got to set something up. What you need to do is you've got to draw guys out of position, because this is the NHL. This is the National Hockey League. This isn't some lesser league where you can capitalize on a lot of mistakes. You need to force those mistakes, and that's what the Hawks aren't doing. You've got to make sure that you're moving these guys out of position. is if the goalie's got a good view, block that view. I mean, Bickle last night had a great one where he used his big body to completely draw the defender that was right there out of position and block the goalie, and it left a wide open shot for Sauter. That's the kind of things you need to do. You need to really create and make sure that you have you're drawing that goalie out of his crease, not completely out of crease, but out of the center of it, so you've got a wide open backside. You need to get that defender out of the front of the net so you can get down low. You need to draw the defense over to one side so you can actually get a clear shot through. There's a lot of things that you have to do. You have to make them make mistakes. You make mistakes is by you having crisp passes, you having better floor vision. You want to see the ice better than they are. Make nice crisp passes. Have streaking guys. Get rebounds. You've got to do these things to capitalize on mistakes. What else do you have with Blackhawks? There was Jim Slater took a run at Patrick Kane, and I loved it. Brent Seabrook stuck up for him and had a really great scrap with Jim Slater. And you sort of hope that something like that sparks the team and really gets them going, and kind of like the Shaw fight from a few weeks ago, or maybe it's been a couple more weeks than that against Dallas. That really got the team going that game, and you hope that fires you up, but it just really hasn't. But it was nice to see him stick up for a teammate. If anything, he deserves his all-star nod for that. And then they had, we were talking a little bit about maybe it's a bunch of games in a row and no days off that the Blackhawks are tired. Maybe that's the case. Well, that's what we were speculating, is because when you're tired, you're not going to be playing as well. You're not going to be playing as tough. You're not going to pass as well. You're going to be a little more likely to be out of position and not make the right moves on the ice, pinching in when you're not supposed to. Whatever it may be, but they had 4 days off. Well, they had 2 practice days, but 2 complete days off and 2 just light practice days. So it was 4 days of no games. And they come back and they lay an egg versus Winnipeg, and they lay an egg versus Dallas. So is it the rest? I don't think so at this point. I think it's a lot of mental lapses on defense. I think it's a lot of too many tweaks in the lineup, too many poor passes, not enough smart shots on goal, not enough greasy goals, and the defense has been pretty bad. You used to be able to count on that top line to be just rock solid, of Seabrook and Keith being rock solid, and then that second one being pretty darn good as well. Nick Hjalmarsson, I think, is really underrated and one of the best defensive players in the league, I think. But then Johnny Oduya has been laying an egg lately, and that bottom defensive pairing has not been very good either. Since TVR has been out, you've been having a lot of David Rundblad, and I just don't think he's up to par. Watching him play out there, and that pairing is just not good. You've got some obvious defensive flaws. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity when you could really use TVR to return. And speaking of that, is about a week ago, Coach Q was asked about TVR, and what he said was, he's on the timeline. He might even be ahead of that curve, Quinville said. I think we had forecast about 3 months for him initially. I think that's he's at a turning point where all of a sudden he can start doing some more things with it and start more of the rehab process. So if we're looking at that, was 3 months was the initial one, and he's ahead of that curve. 3 months would be, let's see, December 16th, February 16th. So we're less than a month away and we get TVR back. Right now it's sort of just maintaining until we can. And granted, TVR he's not Duncan Keith, he's not Nick Hjalmarsson, but he was playing pretty darn well for the Blackhawks, and it was a shame to lose him there. And if nothing else is, you get him back, and you at least shore up that third defensive pairing, because that's just been a huge huge problem over the last few weeks, and Oduya and Rundblad are leading the charge. So I'm just really not sure why, when you've got an army of quality defensive players in Rockford, why you don't at least give them a shot. Clendenning, I thought, played pretty well while I was here. I think Klaus Dahlbeck is going to be really good in this league. So it's I don't understand why you don't bring one of those guys up and replace Rundblad, or move Roosevelt up to that second pairing, and then keep shuffling the guys around in the bottom pairing. It's something to think about. And then the last two things I want to talk about is Tavo scored his first goal, and we talked about his days in Rockford at the beginning of the season, where he was still really struggling to get a sense of this American ice, this North American ice versus the European ice, and he wasn't playing that well. And it's sort of the light came on one day, and you just saw this play in Rockford get better and better. He almost had an opportunity to come up to the Blackhawks even earlier, but he had an illness and missed a few games. But he goes back to Rockford, and he's playing lights out. He's playing like a guy that you would expect natural scorer to be. And then they bring him up, and he's playing pretty well. He's playing a guy that should be a top 6 guy, and finally gets that goal, that payoff. So it's good to see. So hopefully that is a turning point in his career, and he really figures it out and gets that vision back, because he can be a dynamic player if you let him. He's just gotta put in the work. And finally you've got one meteoric rise with Teuvo Teravainen, and then you've got one just crumbling fall with Andrew Shaw. I don't know what is going on with Shaw. He's just playing terribly. I mean, they've demoted him down to 4th line from 2nd line, and that's honestly, does he even deserve to be on the 4th line? They should make a 5th or 6th line so he could just go there and be on it. He's terrible. He's not playing well. He's a -10 on the ice this year for the year. He's not. I mean, he's at his best when he's just being scrappy and he's getting in front of the net and he's being an annoyance to somebody. And the only team he's being an annoyance to is the Blackhawks. His play needs to be better, and I don't even know where to begin. He's out of position. He's just not the same guy. I don't know if there's something I don't know, like he's nursing an injury or what, but he's just not being the same guy that we've come to expect out of Andrew Shaw. I mean, he's not a Brandon Saad where he can be a really offensive player, but he's a scrappy guy, and that's what we need sometimes. But either way, is the Hawks team, this is a really, really tough division. And even when they were in first place, we knew that we were in for a fight to win this division. And now that we've kind of slipped to 3rd, it's hopefully this is a wake-up call to the Blackhawks that they can't rest on their laurels of being the Chicago Blackhawks and coast right into the playoffs at a high seed. That they really, in this division, they really need to play. And playing in this division against these division opponents is going to be a real test to them, and I think it's going to bode well for them in the playoffs if they're able to compete at a high level in their division. Because there's not another division that's as competitive as this one. The Jets are good, the Blues are good, the Blackhawks are good, the Predators are good. It's just a really good division. This division could put out a Stanley Cup finalist or Stanley Cup winner on multiple different fronts. So the Blackhawks really need to step up that game if they really expect to compete in this division and compete far into the playoffs. And that's really all I have to say about the Blackhawks. Switching over to the Bulls, this team is so ugly to watch. They've lost their 5th game in 5 of 7 games, and they had another painful reminder at the beginning of games why that casual pace they start off with is just a real recipe for disaster. In the game the other night, Derrick Rose missed his first shot. Jimmy Butler, Paul Gasol each had turnovers right in the beginning, and that's how they start on offense. Jimmy Butler was quoted as saying, "We've got to stop going at teams lackadaisical, play some defense, cut down on the turnovers. I think that all plays into the hole that we're digging ourselves into," and that's really true. Is the Bulls can compete in 3 quarters, but there's either that first quarter, that fourth quarter, where they just shoot themselves in the foot and give the game away. And part of that is, if you look at all of the players individually, everybody's having a really good year, other than a handful of guys like Doug McDermott not having a good year, but he's had the bad injury. It doesn't really count. But if you're looking Aaron Brooks, you're looking at Derrick Rose, you're looking at everybody as an individual player, people are having good years. Mirotic and Gasol, that's individually, they're all having great seasons. But as a whole, they're not playing the defense that they need to be playing. And part of that hinge on Joakim Noah not being fully healthy this year? Probably. He's a really good defender for the Bulls. Does part of it have to be with Jimmy Butler being a much more offensive mind, that he can't play as much defense? Because if you're playing basically the whole game like Jimmy Butler does, and you focus on defense and expend a lot of your energy on defense, but you're a third, fourth option on offense, okay, you can conserve a little energy on offense and then come back and play tough defense. But if you're one of the go-to guys on offense, and for a while we were all chanting with the Jimmy Butler for MVP slogan, when you're playing a lot of minutes, you're expending it all on offense now, and you can't play as much defense. That's a problem. When you have Joakim Noah in there, you solidify that defense, and that's where they're losing out a lot is on these rotations. The other team is pass, and the Bulls defense is shift, rotate, and finally that last guy is getting an open shot or an open lane to the basket. And that's just bad. Is you've got one guy who loses responsibility and everybody else has to shift over to cover, and eventually, unless that first person just by logic, if that first person doesn't go and cover the last person's player or responsibility, is you have an open man. And that's where the Bulls are getting killed, is because they're leaving open a guy who, this is the NBA, you shouldn't be leaving anybody open, but they're leaving guys open that are just killing them. And that's just not a hallmark of a Tom Thibodeau defense. Going back to the game the other night, is the final stats weren't all that bad for the Bulls. That kind of makes it even more frustrating, the way that they played that first quarter. They shot 46% from the field. They made 9 3-pointers, had 25 assists, and only had 6 turnovers in the final 3 quarters. Those aren't bad numbers. That just means that in that first quarter, with playing so bad, is you dug yourself another hole. And it's hard to overcome these in the NBA because you're playing high-level competition. And again, playing without Joakim Noah is not good for this team as far as their defensive abilities. And even when he's in, he's not 100% Joakim Noah. You can go out there and watch him, and he looks like that same guy that was wearing those bad shoes. He's just not the same player. So they need to give him that time to rest, because you can't win in the NBA playoffs if you don't have a healthy Joakim Noah. And another guy they're missing if you would have told me this in the beginning of the season, I would have called you crazy, but they're missing Mike Dunleavy. And he's been out. He's missed his 8th straight game, and it's really costing the Bulls, not only on offense but on defense as well. Mike Dunleavy is a fairly good defender. You look at him; he was able to cover Carmelo Anthony really well. He's just a good defender without being too flashy. He's not Jimmy Butler good, he's not LeBron James good, but he's a solid defender. He's probably the 3rd best defender on the Bulls, behind Noah and Butler. And when you lose that, the guys you're putting in there are becoming liabilities rather than strengths. And when you put a liability in rather than a strength, the whole defense sort of gets exposed. So until Dunleavy comes back, this team is going to be just treading water. Playing without Noah and without Dunleavy, the Bulls were behind Atlanta's pinpoint ball movement and penetration. And when defensive help does arrive, it leaves the Hawks sharpshooters wide open. Kyle Korver just killed the Bulls. They hit 11 3-pointers and shot 48% from the field. You can't just do that. And then since the beginning of the year, where have been the chance for Jimmy Butler's MVP? I know I was on that bandwagon. I mean, I wasn't saying he should win the MVP, but I was saying he should be considered because of the great way he's playing and carrying this team. He's just sort of fallen off the map a little bit. He's struggled on offense. He's struggling a little bit on defense. So where are these calls for MVP for Jimmy Butler? What about max contract for Jimmy Butler? This is a contract year for this guy. This is the best he's going to play because he's playing for a contract. So that's a little unnerving. Hopefully he's able to turn that back around, but he's just not being the same guy that he was. And then one more note about Mike Dunleavy is, consider this for a quick second. The Bulls have gone just 4-4 while Dunleavy's been out with his ankle injury. And they've had to reshape their rotation with Jimmy Butler at small forward, Kirk Heinrich, Tony Snell, and Etwan Moore at the 2. And all those numbers don't really stick out for the last few seasons. Dunleavy's spot in the starting lineup is crucial for the Bulls going forward. He's he's 12th in the NBA in 3-point shooting for percentage and leads the team in 3-point shots per made. So that's big for the Bulls. You give him that shot from the outside, it makes Paul Gasol look much better going down low. So none of the Bulls individually are having bad seasons. They've got some injuries and it's really compromised the way they play defense. And this is a team that needs to be able to play strong defense to compete for an NBA title. And if they can get all these guys back and healthy, they've got a legitimate shot. But if you've got a gimpy Joakim Noah and you've got Mike Dunleavy in and out of the lineup, you're losing out on that, and you're going to be in a tough spot against a lot of these teams like Atlanta and Washington, and even the not so awesome teams like New Jersey. They're all going to be tough for you. And then just real quickly, before we head out, I want to touch on the Chicago Cubs. Cubs Fest just happened, and it was announced that the bleachers won't be ready for opening game, or the opening series. You're looking at the early May for one set of bleachers, and so the target date for the left field bleachers is the homestand that begins May 11th against the Mets, and the right field bleachers ready by late May. The Cubs are giving options for the roughly 1,000 season ticket holders for either full refunds, or credit to the account, or relocating their seats. And that was one of the big announcements at the Chicago Cubs Fan Fest. And if you ever go around where the Wrigley Field is since they started the renovations, and you go and look at it, of course they're not going to have those bleachers ready. I'm not going to be surprised if they even fall off the timetable a little more, is we're starting to come on the bad part of winter, and it looks like an open hole. It is all torn up like crazy. And by the time baseball season starts, the Cubs are playing the first game of the season, it's still cold in Chicago. Can you cure cement that? In the cold, cement takes a long time to cure and dry and harden. So you're getting at the coldest part of the year, and it's not going to get warm until end of May, and you're expecting to have these bleachers completely done and follow this timetable? No way. I'm so shocked that that's all they said is going to be delayed at this point. And don't be surprised if you see more delays, because this is getting into the crunch time now with the weather. And what else with the Cubs is now it's starting to now you're starting to have, you're forming a team that could actually win something. Before, you just had maybe some decent players here and there, and you were trying to put something together, some positivity. And what you kind of had was a bad team that had pretty good pitching, and a rotation that at some points here and there has been pretty dominant. And even though you gut them every year at trade deadline over the last 3 years, you still have a pretty good rotation. The problem is that offense has been abysmal. And it's not like the Cubs can change their offensive identity overnight. Even if Anthony Rizzo and Starlin Castro keep playing at all-star level, even with so many elite prospects having their best years in front of them, theoretically, it's unfair and unrealistic to kind of expect Chris Bryant to come right up and be the cleanup hitter for this team and be the savior of this team needs whenever he gets called up to Wrigley. That's really unrealistic, even considering that last year he had 43 home runs, 110 RBIs, and an over 1 OPS. Those are fantastic numbers, and I think he's going to be a really good player in this league. But you just don't step right into the big leagues and crush the ball from day one most of the time. Even Hall of Famers, a lot of them struggle in the beginning. It takes a little bit of time to adjust to that hitting, because there's a huge difference between minor league pitching and major league pitching. They figure you out. You've got guys that not only do they have better stuff, but they are much more wily, better coached, and have seen more. And they're going to show you things that you haven't seen yet. And they've already scouted you, and they know how to pitch to you. So you need to develop that. I mean, look at Javi Baez. Struggled mightily out of the gate, even though he's still projecting to be a good Major League Baseball player. He's struggled really hard. And looking at the Cubs, only 4 teams across the majors scored fewer runs than they did last year. They only scored 614 runs. The Cubs ranked 13th out of 15 National League teams in on-base percentage and next to last in hitting with runners in scoring position. Even if you take the Bill James projections for 2015 for Javi Baez and Jorge Soler, which is pretty ridiculous. The projections for them are 60 home runs and 176 RBIs combined. That may seem overly optimistic considering that they're only going to be 22 and 23 years old. But even putting those guys in the lineup, that's still you're still requiring a lot of Cubs to do a lot of heavy lifting in order for this to be even an average to slightly above average offense. Which begs the question is it time to make a trade? You have a lot of puzzle pieces there that can't all make it to the majors, at least not for your team. So do you look at trading some of those guys? Cole Hamels is on the trading block. Will Philadelphia finally come down a little bit from their asking price? What about Jordan Zimmerman? If you could team those two, one of those two, with John Lester and Jake Arrieta, the Cubs have a sick rotation. You don't need to have as good of an offense. It kind of, what it does is it lessens the burden on that offense and makes you be a team that all you need is a little bit of opportunistic hitting. And you can't fall in love with your prospects. And I know Gary and I bicker about that a lot when he's on the show. I tend to fall in love with prospects, but I know you can't be in love with them all. Here's a quote from one of the Cubs minor league heads of minor league scouting is, you have to put them in a good position to succeed and set them up to make them look attractive to other teams as well. You can't just look at it and say, hey, we love every prospect in this organization. We do, but you have to understand that these guys were drafted and developed to be the big league club, to be at the big league club, whether it's with us or as a trade piece to bring back something else that can help us win championships. You can love prospects, but you don't love them like they're an established major league property or like they're one of your kids. You have to love them differently, and it's fine to be in love with a player because that's why you drafted them, and you see what abilities they have. but you need to realize that there's a lot of guys that did well in the minors that never made it to the majors or weren't what you expected to be in the majors. So you need to figure out who it is that you don't think is going to succeed based on what they've done for your organization, make them look as good as possible, and then try to flip them for established major league talent to help you win, because that's what you need to do. This is a tough league to win in, and the Cubs haven't done it in over 100 years, so they've got to do something to turn that around. One last piece, Chicago White Sox, just a couple of things. Is Adam Dunn is officially retired. I mean, I know he kept saying he wasn't going to play in 2015, but he has announced via his agent Brian Peters that he is retired. He submitted the papers and everything. So Adam Dunn is retiring with 462 home runs, 838 plus home run years. He was a pretty good baseball player in this league, and regardless of how the White Sox fans feel about him from that first season, he's a pretty good baseball player. You've got, looking at your pitching staff, Chris Sale, Jeff Samardzija, and Jose Quintana. They have accounted for more wins above replacement in 2014 than any team's top 3 starters heading into this division, and that includes the Dodgers' top 3 with Clayton Kershaw and the Detroit's top 3. So you have, the only way that will change is if these rumors of Max Scherzer going to the Nationals are true. They would be slightly above the White Sox. But that's got to be exciting to think that you've got the best top 3 starters in a rotation out of anybody in baseball. That's a good prospect, because if you can win most of those games with those top 3 and win 50% or 40% of the games with your last 2 starters, you've got a pretty phenomenal season coming up. And I know it doesn't all work like that, but still, if you could put 3 great top of the line rotation guys in your top 3, that just makes your whole rotation look really solid. And finally, the White Sox will be honoring their longtime captain, Paul Konerko, and retire his number 14 prior to the game Saturday, May 23rd against the Minnesota Twins. There's going to be a replica Paul Konerko statue giveaway that game. So make sure you, when tickets go on sale, you get that one, because it's only for the first 20,000 fans, and which is a fair amount of fans to go to a White Sox game. Not a knock, but they don't always fill the seats. But that'll be a big game, so you want to make sure you get tickets for that. And that's really all I have to say about that. Is one more time I'm going to say, check us out on iTunes and Stitcher. Subscribe if you don't already subscribe. You can even check us out and subscribe on youtube.com. And check us out at swerskisports.com, facebook.com/swerskisports, and Twitter at swerskisports. And check out our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Like I said, next home game is a big one. It's not just if you are a fan of hockey and you've been on the fence about going. It's a great game to go to, because it's going to be a fundraiser for Swedish American Hospital, and also the Mary Kay and Swedish American Foundations. So it's a fundraiser game. They're going to be playing a cool game on pink ice with pink jerseys to raise breast cancer awareness. So check that out. January 24th versus the Utica Comets. It's Saturday. Puck drops at 7. And like I said, the Ice Hogs, it's their annual Pink in the Rink night. They'll be skating on pink ice, wearing pink jerseys, and they're going to auction off the game-worn jerseys during the game. Check out tickets at icehogs.com and tell them Swerski Sports sent you. So thanks a lot for listening. Make sure to check us out every week. And next week, we will have our quarterback breakdown, starting our draft coverage of the NFL. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van. And she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. Stop! Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.